I still remember the night I received the call. It was a cold autumn evening, and I was alone in my apartment. My phone rang unexpectedly, jolting me out of my thoughts. On the other end of the line was my old friend Daniel, his voice shaking with fear. He told me that he had just returned from a camping trip in the deep woods, and something unexplainable had happened. Daniel had always been adventurous, seeking solitude in nature, but this time his story was different. He explained that he had set out to spend a weekend in the wilderness to clear his mind. However, as he ventured further into the forest, the atmosphere changed. The air grew heavy and still, and an eerie silence took over, replacing the usual sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves. He paused frequently, as if listening for something he could not quite identify. His voice dropped to a whisper when he mentioned strange noises and unsettling movements in the shadows. I could hear his heart pounding over the line. I felt an immediate chill run down my spine. I knew then that this was not just another camping mishap. This was something far more disturbing, something that I had to share with you. Daniel continued his story with trembling detail. He explained that as soon as he left his campsite, the forest seemed to come alive in a different way. The path he had taken was overgrown and barely visible. I could almost see the gnarled tree roots twisting along the trail. He said that every step he took was accompanied by a strange crunch beneath his boots, as if the forest floor was hiding secrets. The silence was broken only by the sound of his own breathing and the occasional snap of a twig. I imagined him moving slowly, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing patches of mist that clung to the ground. At one point, Daniel noticed markings on the trees, scratches that looked almost deliberate. They were deep and jagged, like claw marks left by something furious. His voice dropped again as he mentioned that the wind seemed to carry whispers, soft and unintelligible, like voices calling from beyond. I felt a shiver imagining him standing there, alone, surrounded by the unknown. He recalled how his instincts screamed for him to turn back, yet he pressed on, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread. The deeper he went, the more the forest appeared to change. The trees grew thicker and the shadows longer. There was a palpable sense of being watched, as if unseen eyes were tracking his every move. I could almost hear his racing heartbeat in my ears as he described that moment. Daniel's words painted a picture of isolation and mounting terror, a slow descent into a nightmare that he could not escape. He told me he could feel the weight of the forest pressing in on him, and each step felt heavier than the last. His account made me question if nature itself could harbor such malevolence. Then the unthinkable happened. Daniel reached a clearing where the trees parted to reveal an old, crumbling cabin. The structure was barely visible under the moonlight, its broken windows and warped door giving it a ghostly appearance. As he stepped closer, his flashlight flickered, and the darkness seemed to swallow the light. I could almost feel his panic as he recounted that moment. Suddenly, a sound like heavy footsteps echoed from behind the cabin. Daniel turned slowly, his breath catching in his throat. I could hear him say, "Is someone there?" in a trembling whisper. Before he could react further, a figure emerged from the shadows. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its presence was overwhelming. I listened in disbelief as Daniel described the creature. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, and its skin appeared to be a patchwork of scars and decay. My heart raced as I imagined him standing face to face with this horror. He felt paralyzed, every instinct screaming to run, yet his feet were rooted to the ground. The creature let out a low, guttural sound, and the air grew colder by the second. In that moment, time seemed to stretch. I could hear Daniel's voice shaking as he said that he saw the creature raise a hand slowly, as if beckoning him closer. His mind was clouded with terror, and he could feel his own pulse pounding in his ears. The night was filled with the sound of his ragged breathing and the eerie silence that followed the creature's call. That chilling encounter left him frozen in place, and even now, I can still feel the weight of that horror pressing against my heart. After that harrowing night, Daniel managed to escape the forest, but the terror he experienced would haunt him forever. He returned to civilization a changed man, his eyes haunted by memories he could not erase. For weeks, he suffered from nightmares that blurred the line between sleep and waking horror. I remember the tremor in his voice when he recounted his escape, how he spoke of running without looking back, as if fleeing from a relentless pursuer. He described the forest as a living entity that consumed all who dared to disturb its dark secrets. Even now, when I walk near wooded areas, I can feel an inexplicable chill. Every rustle of leaves reminds me of that night, and I sometimes catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, only to find nothing there. I often replay Daniel's story in my mind, trying to piece together the mystery of that cursed clearing and the creature that dwelled within it. His experience made me question reality, blurring the line between legend and truth. I have since avoided deep woods, preferring the safety of well-lit paths. But the memory of that chilling encounter lingers, a constant reminder that the wilderness holds dangers far beyond our understanding. I urge you to be cautious. If you ever find yourself drawn to the depths of an ancient forest, listen to your instincts and respect the unseen. There are forces in nature that do not wish to be disturbed. I share Daniel's story as both a warning and a plea. Sometimes, the call of the wild is not one of peace, but a summons to confront horrors that defy explanation. My heart still pounds when I think of that night. Even as I write these words, I feel the cold grip of fear. Remember, not all that lurks in the deep woods is meant to be seen, and some secrets are best left undiscovered. Stay safe, and tread carefully, for in the wilderness, every shadow might hide a nightmare waiting to be unleashed. Even now, the memory of that fateful night sends shivers down my spine. I often wonder if Daniel's terror was a glimpse into a hidden world of darkness. Remember my warning: the deep woods keep their secrets, and they are not forgiving. Trust your instincts and never wander unprepared into the unknown ever again now. I still remember that night in the deep, dark woods. I was on a solo camping trip, trying to escape the chaos of everyday life. I never expected to encounter something so chilling. It all began when I decided to leave civilization behind for a few days. The air was crisp and the trees whispered secrets as I walked the narrow path. I had heard rumors of strange happenings in these parts, but I dismissed them as local folklore. Yet, as I ventured further into the wilderness, an unsettling feeling crept over me. My heart pounded with both excitement and dread. I was drawn to the silence of the forest, a silence that felt too heavy, too alive. I had planned to spend a night under the stars, alone with my thoughts. I set up my small tent near a clear stream. The sound of water was soothing, and I thought it would keep the darkness at bay. But as night fell, an eerie quiet replaced the gentle rustling of leaves. I felt like I was being watched. I noticed shadows moving just beyond my campfire's reach. I tried to rationalize the noises as animals, but deep down, I knew something was off. I recorded these thoughts in my journal, unsure if anyone would ever believe what I experienced. This is the story of that night, and trust me, it changed me forever. Even now, I shudder recalling every moment of that dreadful night. I cannot ever forget that terror. The following day, I decided to explore the forest further. I left my campsite early in the morning, determined to uncover the mysteries hidden among the towering trees. The trail was overgrown and barely visible. I trudged along, feeling an unusual mix of awe and trepidation. The forest seemed to have a life of its own. Every snap of a twig under my boot sent shivers down my spine. I felt the weight of unseen eyes following my every move. I climbed a small hill and paused. From that vantage point, I could see endless stretches of dark woods. The forest floor was dappled with sunlight, but the deeper you went, the more the shadows took over. I heard faint whispers carried by the wind. I paused to listen. They sounded like distant voices, murmuring secrets I could not decipher. My heart raced. I knew I was far from any help. Hours passed as I wandered deeper. I encountered a clearing where the trees formed a perfect circle. In the middle, there was an old, weathered stone with strange carvings. I felt compelled to approach it. As I got closer, a cold breeze swept over me. I noticed that the carvings seemed to tell a story, one of betrayal, sorrow, and something sinister lurking beneath the surface of nature. I began to doubt my decision to explore. The deeper I went, the more the forest changed. The trees grew twisted, their branches resembling grasping hands. I heard a series of loud cracks behind me. I spun around. There was nothing, just the empty woods and the sound of my own breath. My heart pounded louder. I remembered the eerie silence of the night at my campsite. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I felt a presence, silent, patient, and malevolent. The forest itself seemed to close in around me, as if trying to trap me within its ancient, haunted bounds. Every rustle, every whisper made me feel increasingly vulnerable. I clutched my flashlight tighter, its beam trembling in the darkness. I couldn't explain the overwhelming sensation of dread that washed over me. It was as if the woods were alive, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As dusk began to settle, the forest turned into a maze of dark silhouettes. I decided it was time to return to my campsite. The way back, however, was no longer clear. The path I had taken seemed to vanish into the underbrush. I called out, my voice echoing through the trees, but no answer came. I felt lost and alone. Every direction looked the same, endless trees and impenetrable shadows. Suddenly, I heard a distinct sound, a low, guttural growl that resonated deep within the forest. I froze. My pulse raced as I turned slowly. In the dim light, I could make out a figure. It was standing among the trees, half hidden by the darkness. My breath caught. I felt as if time had slowed. The figure moved, almost imperceptibly, yet its presence was unmistakable. I tried to back away, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. The creature stepped forward. I could see its eyes glinting in the weak light, a pair of burning coals in a sea of darkness. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I took a shaky step back. I heard a rustle behind me and spun around, fearing that something else was coming. The forest seemed to breathe around me. I whispered, "Who are you?" My voice trembled as I spoke. There was no reply, only the oppressive silence and the sound of my own rapid heartbeat. In that moment, I knew I was not alone. The figure advanced slowly, each step measured and deliberate. I felt an icy grip of terror seize my soul. The creature's presence was overwhelming. I tried to run, but my legs betrayed me. I stumbled, my flashlight falling to the ground and shattering. Darkness swallowed me, punctuated by the sound of my frantic breathing and the creature's slow, deliberate approach. I felt its cold breath on my neck, and in that moment, I was face to face with something beyond human, a dark entity that thrived on fear and despair. I managed to break free from the creature's grip and fled through the woods. I ran blindly, my only thought being survival. I could still feel its presence lingering in the air, watching me from the shadows. I eventually found my way back to my campsite, though nothing looked the same. The once welcoming clearing was now a place of haunting memories. I packed up hastily and left the forest, the echo of that night haunting my every step. I still wake up in cold sweats. I hear those whispers in the dead of night. I have tried to forget, but the deep woods hold secrets that are not meant for human eyes. I share my story as a warning. Sometimes the wilderness hides horrors far more real than any urban legend. If you venture into the deep woods alone, be prepared for what may be waiting in the shadows. My heart still pounds when I remember that encounter, and I shudder at the thought of what might have happened if I had not escaped. I learned that some places are cursed. Some legends are warnings. I will never walk those trails again, and I urge you to be cautious. The forest is not just trees and silence. It is a keeper of dark mysteries, and sometimes it reaches out to claim what is left behind. Remember my tale, and think twice before you step into the darkness. Stay safe, and do not ignore the whispers of the wild. I still tremble recalling that dreadful night. I sought solitude and a break from the daily grind. I needed to escape city life. But what I found was something I never imagined, a night that changed me forever. Friends had warned me to stay away, yet I was determined to find my own answers. The dense forest called with whispering winds and towering trees. I packed my small backpack with essentials, a flashlight, and my phone, hoping to capture nature's untouched beauty. My excitement mixed with a strange dread. As I stepped beneath the heavy canopy, the familiar world faded away. I walked along an unmarked trail lined with ancient oaks and twisted pines. Their gnarled branches reached out as if to warn me. I noticed an eerie silence, broken only by occasional rustles from unseen creatures. A chill crept over me despite the crisp air. My heart raced with each step. I recorded my journey, expecting a tale of adventure. But as darkness fell, an unsettling feeling took hold. I saw strange symbols carved into tree trunks, symbols that stirred both curiosity and terror. I pressed onward, unaware that these marks were the first whispers of the horror awaiting me. I could not shake the feeling that the forest held secrets too dark for daylight, and every step I took deepened my sense of foreboding. Build up. I continued along a narrow trail, winding deeper into the forest. The trees grew thicker, and the light dimmed. I sensed that I was no longer on a safe path. Every snap of a twig made me jump. I clutched my flashlight and whispered, "Stay calm, stay alert." The forest came alive with strange sounds. I heard a distant rustle like footsteps echoing behind me. I turned quickly but saw nothing. After a few minutes, I discovered an old wooden cabin hidden among the trees. Its windows were dark and the door hung loosely on its hinges. I hesitated at the threshold. Although the cabin appeared abandoned, I felt drawn to it. I pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. Dust danced in the beam of my flashlight as I surveyed the room. Faded photographs lined the walls, their faces blurred by time. I noticed carvings on the walls, the same strange symbols I had seen on the trees outside. My pulse quickened. I murmured, "What does this mean?" The heavy silence that followed was suffocating. As I explored further, I heard a soft thud behind me. I spun around and caught a fleeting shadow dart past a broken window. My heart pounded as I followed the sound, hoping to uncover the truth. But the shadow vanished into the dark corridors of the cabin. I left the cabin with my mind swirling with questions. Outside, the forest had grown even darker. The trees leaned in closer, their branches forming eerie silhouettes. I began to hear low murmurs blending with the rustling leaves. Each step felt like a trap closing in. The deeper I ventured, the more I sensed a malevolent presence stalking me. I quickened my pace, my breath shallow and rapid, glancing back in fear. The oppressive darkness seemed to swallow any hope of safety. Every rustle and whisper deepened my paranoia, and I felt as though the forest itself was conspiring against me. Climax. As midnight approached, I found myself in a clearing that felt otherworldly. In the center stood a massive stone altar covered in ancient runes and tangled vines. I was irresistibly drawn to it. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into utter darkness. I froze. The silence was broken only by my pounding heart. A low, guttural growl echoed from behind the altar. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. From the shadows emerged a figure unlike any I had seen. It was tall and emaciated, its pale, almost translucent skin stretched over angular bones. Its eyes burned with a dim, unnatural light, and I felt its gaze piercing me. I took a hesitant step back, terror surging through me. The figure advanced with slow, deliberate steps. I tried to run, but my legs refused to obey. The creature's presence was overpowering. I heard the rustle of leaves as it drew nearer. Every detail of its horrifying visage is etched in my memory. I recall the chill of its cold breath as it leaned in close. My heart pounded so fiercely I feared it might shatter. I felt a sharp, icy pain as if cold fingers had grasped my skin. In that frozen moment, time stood still, and I was engulfed by pure, unadulterated fear. I struggled against the paralyzing dread as the figure reached out a skeletal hand. I managed to jerk away, scrambling backwards. I fell hard to the ground, trembling uncontrollably as I watched the creature loom over me. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath, every sound muted by the weight of the terror that gripped me. I mustered every ounce of courage to look up into the creature's eyes, even as despair washed over me. For a fleeting moment, I felt as though I was staring into the abyss of my own soul. The encounter seared itself into my mind, a reminder that some horrors are inescapable beyond reason. Conclusion: I must have blacked out for a few agonizing minutes. When I awoke, the eerie silence of the forest was broken by my frantic breathing. The dreadful figure was gone. I scrambled to my feet, every nerve on edge. I ran blindly through the oppressive darkness, my mind swirling with terror and confusion. Every snap of a twig and rustle of leaves sent my heart into a frenzy. I did not dare to look back, I only ran, desperate for escape. Eventually, I stumbled upon a familiar path leading toward civilization. The first light of dawn broke through the dense canopy as I emerged from the forest. I reached my car, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I fumbled for the keys. I drove away, not daring to glance in the rearview mirror, though I felt the lingering presence of that night. My body was marked by cold sweat and fear, a constant reminder of what I had witnessed. Now I share this story as both a warning and a confession. The deep woods hold secrets that defy explanation. They harbor ancient horrors that lie in wait for the unsuspecting. I have tried to forget that dreadful night, but its memory haunts every shadow and whisper of the forest. I no longer venture into the wilderness, and I caution you to be wary if you do. Trust your instincts, and never ignore the gnawing feeling of dread. I have learned that some mysteries are best left undisturbed. The forest is not merely beautiful. It is a living entity with its own dark heart. The terror I experienced is etched into my soul, and it reminds me daily that some horrors never truly fade. That night, the memories clung to me like a shadow that would not vanish. I still wake up with a racing heart, haunted by the echoes of the forest's dark call. This is my truth, my never-ending, relentless nightmare.